Hello there, dear viewers, and welcome to haQ attaQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host, and you're watching a haQ attaQ episode. And in this episode, I want to present to you AUMPoly, a polyphonic synthesizer that I put together inside AUM. Is there anything to gain from building your own synth inside AUM over just using a plugin, something finished and ready to go? If you wanted to start working, then you do not start by building a synth. You just grab something and start working with that. But if you want to learn about synthesis, well, building a synth forces you to learn about it. And not only that, you get to build it the way you want it, with the effects you want, with the filter you want, with the oscillators that you want. And there are so many different ways of combining different modules together in order to make a synth. It gets wild and deep very quickly. So why did I build this? Well, because I can, and I like building things, and I like solving puzzles, and that's what this is. I'm building things and I'm solving puzzles. Oscillator waveform, pulse width, filter, envelope, envelope time, reverb, and chorus. And we have a polyphony of up to 5. Alright, so what do you need to build a synth? Well, you need a waveform generator or an oscillator. In this case, I used multiple ones because I wanted to build something polyphonic or paraphonic, so I ended up using 5 oscillators. You also need some kind of a mixer to put all the signals together from all oscillators, and that's AUM itself. And then we need to be able to control amplitude over time, and we're doing that with an envelope, and in my case I used Flux Mini 2. 5 instances of them, because remember, I wanted to make a polyphonic synth, so I wanted each and every one of the voices to be expressive in their own way. Only it ended up not being... I'll have to show you in a bit. Now, I wanted to build a subtractive synthesizer, so we need a filter too. And lastly, I wanted some effects on there, so yeah, that's something we need for this synth. So for the filter, I went for F16 filter from Blamsoft. For the reverb, I chose Rack Reverb by AudioKit. It's an amazing sounding reverb, completely free, 100% free, and it just sounds so good. Now, I do have a chorus in here, and I put it after the reverb in the effect chain. And I did that because I wanted to treat the reverb tail with some chorus too. Being able to make it all sound kind of like chorusy and dissonant is just what I wanted out of this synth. Now there is one more plugin in here, and I'm using it to treat the signal from all oscillators before they hit the effect chain, and that is Reamp by Klevgrend Produkter. I'm using this to kind of dirty up the sound and heat up the sound before it hits the effects. And of course we need some way of playing it, and I'm using KB1 and also some controls to control the actual synthesizer and being able to sculpt our sound and control effects and stuff like that. And I'm using KB1 again for that. Now, as you might have noticed, I haven't said anything about LFOs because I didn't put any LFOs in here. I just couldn't find a way of implementing it and having it being tied to the control scheme that I had built inside here. So I might add an LFO in the future of AUMPoly, but right now, at this point in time, there are no LFOs. Now, when it comes to the audio, there's nothing fancy. So all of the outputs from all 5 oscillators are being outputted into one main channel. And I'm doing this with this pinkly color. I'm using an audio bus inside AUM here, and I've colored it pink. Can you say pinkly? So the audio is just running straight into the master channel through the effects and out to the output. And that's all there is. I think this is the shortest segment in the video. If I open up the MIDI controller here and turn the oscillator waveform, we can see that I'm controlling the oscillator waveform. And with this one, I'm controlling the pulse width. Now, this actually happens in all of the instances of AUGEN-X. Now, I could add more controllers to control these waveforms individually, but I didn't. It's pretty silly, really. Right beneath AUGEN-X, we have our envelopes, one for each instance of AUGEN-X. And by the way, Flux Mini has been set to one-shot mode, so every time you press a key, it goes through the sequence or the graph that you've drawn. I wanted this synth to be truly polyphonic, meaning each and every one of the voices would be able to be expressive in their own way. Only the problem is that I didn't build a controller interface to actually be able to be really expressive with each and every one of the voices individually. So if we tweak the envelope here, we can see that envelope time tweaks the sync control, giving us a shorter envelope or a longer envelope. So you can have a 10-second long envelope at the most, and you can have a 500 millisecond envelope at the shortest. I can also control the envelope attack and decay, and what does that look like? Well, if I tweak this, you can see that it's actually moving the attack point, making it softer and rounder, and the decay makes it longer. This took a lot of MIDI mapping, because not only did I have to map the pink nodes, I also had to map some of the purple nodes. Right, so if we scroll over here, we have this channel with a bunch of stuff. Now this one is controlled by our little control module. So if I pull the filter cut off, you can see that I'm controlling that, and this one controls the filter resonance. And yeah, that's pretty much it. For our reverb, we're actually using rack reverb, and when we pull up the noise verb here, we can see that we're not only controlling the mix of the reverb, we're also controlling low cut, so we're getting less bass when I turn this up. But there is another thing happening, because as you can see, it says noise verb, and the noise is actually pink noise. And if we open up an instance here of AUGEN-X and I turn this down, we can see that we're getting pink noise from AUGEN-X at the same time. And I did this just to add a little bit of texture to the synth whenever I pull up the reverb. I love building macros, and if you want to know what macros are, if you don't know, then I do have a video on how you can build macros inside AUM. Now lastly, we do have a chorus control here. So when we're moving this around, we can see that I'm controlling the mix like this, up and down, and also the depth like that. And I might have mislabeled these things right here, I'm not sure, but that's pretty much it. Okay, so this allows me to play 5 notes at the most with this synth. But how am I controlling this with the keyboard? Well, I am using an app called polyphemus. It looks like this. It's an AUv3 and it basically splits up voices. And so if you connect a keyboard to this, which I have with KB1, if you play 3 notes in here, it splits up the notes on different channels and you're able to send them out to different synths or different apps or drum machines or whatever you want to send them to. And if we look inside AUM's connection matrix, then we can see that right here we have KB1 going into polyphemus, and then polyphemus is sending out notes into Audio-X and also Flux Mini. So this makes it so that when I play one note, it plays on the first channel here, as you can see. And if I play the next one, we can see that it's playing the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and on and on and on. No MIDI Learn. What does that mean? Well, here's something that might make a lot of you think twice before even starting a project like this. You see, I had to set up all of these controls by hand and map them by hand, setting up the CC channel and the MIDI channel. Why? Because, I mean, AUM has MIDI Learn. You go to this icon, you press here, and you've activated the MIDI Learn mode, and all you have to do now is to tweak a knob here, and then with the hardware controller knob, it's easy. Press Learn, tweak the knob on your hardware controller, and you're done. But what happens when you try to do this with an app MIDI controller? Well, the window disappears. And yeah, so that's annoying. Wish there was a way of pinning that window, but that might be something you want to consider before you start a project like this. Now, when it comes to the way that this synth looks, it has this somewhat nicely looking graphical synth overlay. And this is something I added in post. I made this thing inside Affinity Designer by adding a few layers together and adding some graphics that I drew by hand with my Apple Pencil. I just wanted the final synth to look more like a synth, more cohesive. Not just like a bunch of AUv3 modules put together, but more like a, finished synth. And even though it really doesn't, I think it looks interesting anyway, especially with that little pattern there. And I mean, putting that there, sure, I was inspired by the Arturia Micro Freak. I love that synth and I like the way that they did that. Now, as you can see, there's a green screen in here, and I'm actually adding this green screen with VS Visual Synthesizer. And normally I'd run graphics in there, shaders and stuff. But this time I didn't. I put a green screen there so I could key out the green and put whatever else I wanted in there in post. Put a video there, which is how I put these words in there with the nice scrolling background. And the reason to why I didn't use VS itself to actually put visual graphics in there was I didn't want to tax my system with more graphical stuff, because there's a lot going on inside this session. And sessions like these can get heavy, both on CPU and DSP, and I just want the synth to run smoothly. Now, I both recommend and at the same time do not recommend that people do this, because on one side, it's fun. On the other, it's just a hassle. And in the end, the synth might not be as good as a regular synth, which in this case, it really isn't, because I've got clicky envelopes and I've kind of hid that throughout the video. But yeah, that's the way it is. The nice thing is that you can build this synth however you want. You can give it as much polyphony as your system can handle. You can put so many different effects on there, drastically changing the sound and character of your synth. You can tweak the envelopes in a certain way to give your synth a special character. There's just so much that you can do. So yeah, I think I'm recommending you do this more than I'm not recommending it. But that MIDI mapping thing, it was a real pain in the... If you liked this video, then why don't you give me a thumbs up? If you thought that this video was absolutely useless and you don't like me and you don't want me to succeed here on YouTube, give me a thumbs down. Now, if you want to support me in a financial way, then I do suggest that you go and check out my music first. Full list of links down below. And if you don't want to check out my music, I've got a PayPal and I've got Patreon. And if you don't want to do any of it, that's fine too. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.